so on. So I wanted to ask you first about the early days of you playing guitar, or when you got in touch with music.
My parents got divorced when I was about 5 or 6 years old in the UK, and my mother remarried somebody who was an American in the military, and so we came to the U.S. and lived for a little bit in Florida when I was a young child, and then we went to Germany. I lived in Germany for 3 years, and then we came back to the U.S. when I was about 10 years old or something, and that's when I kind of lived in El Paso, Texas as a young teenager, and until I was about 16. Then I went away to a boarding school in Arizona, in northern Arizona, in Sedona. And then after that, that's when I moved to the Los Angeles area. And I had applied to go to I really wanted to study music seriously. And so I applied to go to the Royal Academy of Music in London. And I applied to go to Berklee School of Music in Boston. And then I also applied to Cal Arts, which is where I ended up going outside of Los Angeles. I was attracted to Cal Arts because they had a interesting composition program, and they were getting a lot of interesting avant-garde composers that would come and do residencies there. So that was attractive to me. And then also,
how old were you?
I didn't actually, when I first went to Cal Arts, I was 17, because I ended up skipping my last year in high school because I just didn't want to go to high school anymore. So
makes sense.
It was a really interesting experience anyway. So that was basically, I was studying composition with a view towards writing serious instrumental music and kind of avant-garde electronic music. I was studying electronic music also. Wow. And also what was great was, it was such a wonderful place because you could study South Indian music, North Indian music. You could study Balinese music. I took a Ketjak class, which is where everybody sits in a circle and does that kind of crazy chanting. L. Subramaniam, one of the most incredible violinists who's alive now, was teaching South Indian music there. I took a class with him. So it was a really stimulating and interesting place, certainly, to be. I mean, my mind was just basically exploded by the talent that I was around. It was quite incredible. But I wasn't studying guitar there. I've studied guitar on my own, and I'd had some classical guitar lessons throughout my teenage years. But classical guitar is really, it's extremely difficult to do well. It's very unforgiving, and you basically just have to, it's like being a classical pianist. If you want to be
every day
good at it, you just have to do it all the time. And once again, I didn't have that kind of maturity to do that. And I still love classical guitar and play it very occasionally, but it's really tough.
I read somewhere that John Cage visited the campus and made a residency there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he was there. I think he maybe came there twice, but he'd come there for a couple of weeks, and you could take his composition seminars, and students would get together and they'd put on performances of some of his pieces, which was really challenging for everybody, for the students and for the audiences. Sure. He would have these big, long sections of silence in some of his pieces. And I remember they did everybody was very nervous because they were going to do this performance of this piece called Winter Music. And it has a lot of big silences in it. So he was there. Everybody was very nervous. And everybody really wanted to hear this. This is basically a piece that you can never hear anywhere, because it takes 3 or 4 hours to play it. And so they had this concert at night about 8 o'clock or something, and John Cage was there. Everybody was very excited. And after about 45 minutes in one of these big long silence sections, you could hear somebody snoring. Somebody completely fell asleep. Everybody got extra nervous about that. And they were kind of looking at John Cage, and he was kind of smiling to himself. And the person kept snoring louder and louder. And everybody just thought this was hilarious. And so the parts of those kind of pieces where there is silence allows for the environment to become part of the music.
Something to happen in the moment.
Yeah, so if there's a dog barking or if there's a car screeching outside, it's all part of the thing, and it makes it so the music is completely different all the time. So
that's very interesting.
Yeah, so that was super interesting, and he was, very much a philosophy-based person. So he would, and actually he was a mushroom expert also, which is
really
people that know about John Cage kind of know this about him. But yeah, he was one of the world's foremost experts on mushrooms. And I remember a seminar where he just talked about mushrooms and kind of their place in the world. And, this was before kind of mushrooms were cool as they're
the big explosion for psychedelics and
yeah. So, that was certainly interesting. And there were plenty of great avant-garde guys that dropped in. And I was lucky to be there at a time when that was happening, and those guys were all still alive. So it was really interesting, if it was a bit intimidating to me, because that was, kind of peak Los Angeles punk rock time, like the late 70s to the early 80s is when I lived there. So that was a great time to see every one of those legendary bands like Fear and
the Germs.
And the Go-Go's and Wall of Voodoo. All those kind of people were just playing every weekend. Devo had moved there, and they used to do shows at the Whiskey A Go-Go in the afternoons, and you could go and pay $2 and see the Weirdos and Fear and the Go-Go's, or Weirdos and Fear and Devo play together, for $2.
That's crazy to think.
Yeah. Yep. So, and there were lots of other bands that were touring the US who would come and play in LA at that time, like Bad Brains and people like that, who were really, something to see back then, So
wow. I didn't know that Devo was throwing there around that time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think they were from Akron, maybe, or Dayton. Yeah, possibly Akron. And I guess they, it's one of those stories where things in your hometown are terrible, and you're 20 years ahead of what anybody's thinking about. So, they moved to LA, and I think this is even before they put out their first record. So they were making singles, and they were still making all those crazy early movies. And when you went to see them, they showed the crazy movie of Boogie Boy running down the stairs with his mask on, and then there he was on the stage, So that was really cool. And I remember being really impressed when they finally did put their first record out, and it was produced by Brian Eno. Which was really, I was just going, okay, that means that this is actually good,
I heard one, I think it's a bootleg, but they have a lot of 70s bootlegs and singles, Devo, and I heard one for Mechanical Man, I think. It's very, very early. It's really good.
Yeah, they're interesting, and I kind of lost. I was glad they got as gigantic as they did, but the last record that I really was interested in was probably Duty Now for the Future, which is their second one,
Yeah.
And I still think that's maybe their best one. But once they started getting into, what was it?
Yeah,
Duty Now for the Future
yeah,
and all that kind of stuff, you know.
they
No,
got
that's
completely
a
later.
different one.
It's strange.
Freedom of choice,
Yeah.
you know, all that kind of stuff. You know, I was already someplace else by then.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But I always liked Devo. I mean, you know, the world would be a poorer place without Devo, that's for sure.
Exactly. So was it in LA or San Francisco that Clown Alley began to play, rehearse
That was in San Francisco, and that was a few years.
later?
Yeah, I left. I was with Lori Black at the time. Lori Black. I actually met Lori Black when we went to Cal Arts together.
Oh,
So,
wow.
so she was my girlfriend from probably 1979 until really 1988. So we were together for a long time.
Yeah.
And uh, she was from the Bay Area originally and didn't want to live in LA. So she'd moved back to the Bay Area and was came back and spent time in Los Angeles with me and just said, "Well, we should move up there. It's just better." And it was better. You know, San Francisco is a much nicer place than Los Angeles. I mean, and I just didn't want to have to spend, you know, an hour and a half in my car every day, which is what you have to do in Los Angeles. You have to do a lot of driving and people get used to it. And I'd been to San Francisco a few times by then, so I knew what a nice place it was. So we moved up there in 1983 and started wanting to put a band together. I'm the one who taught Lori how to play bass, actually. She started getting interested in it in 79 or 80, pretty soon after we got together. She always loved the guitar and could play the guitar a little bit, but the bass really resonated with her. And so when we moved to San Francisco, we said, hey, we were kind of like, let's put a band together. So the very first version of Clown Alley actually had 3 girls and me in it. So
Wow.
there was a girl singer, a girl drummer, and Lori and me. Girl drummer was actually ended up becoming the drummer in the Lunachicks, I
Yes.
think is the name of them. Yeah, Becky. So she might have been in the Lunachicks for a little bit before she moved to San Francisco. But anyway, so that was kind of funny and interesting and weird. And people would say, this band would be really good if they would just get rid of the guitar player, you know. So Lori and I always thought that was real funny since I wrote all the songs. But so eventually that did happen. It kind of imploded. So yeah, we kept trying to find people to play with, and we found Dave, who was a singer, used to be in a band, Jerry's Kids, from Albuquerque. And then we had our first drummer was called Neil. Actually, I'm going to put up a video, I think, of him. There's a weird old Clown Alley gig of him playing. And then there was another drummer called Justin who played on the record. And then eventually he didn't want to do it anymore.
That was
So
Circus of Chaos.
yeah, Circus of Chaos. Yeah, that's right. So he quit. And then we got on Alchemy Records, there was a band called SACRILEGE.
Yeah.
And they were kind of like, you know, sort of like if Slayer was a teenager band or something.
Yeah.
You know,
Exactly.
so they were kind of that part of that Bay Area thrash thing. But there was kind of a cool thing going on where there were some kind of crossover bands like Clown Alley and some other bands, and they would play on metal shows, and then metal guys would play on some kind of crossover shows or punk rock shows.
And that was normal in the Bay Area, that there wasn't like a fight between.
Well, there were some people who were on both sides who were like Maximum Rock and Roll, the magazine.
Yeah.
They didn't like the fact that Clown Alley played on metal shows. They would just go, well, you're kind of, it was just silly. They were kind of, you're betraying the I don't even know what we were betraying, because we were just playing with our friends, So somebody asked you to come and play on a show. I wasn't going to go, well, do you have, what kind of band do you have? I was grateful to play anywhere. So there was a really sort of great camaraderie on some level from bands on these kind of edges that just wanted to have a good time. So, we would go and hang out with Sacrilege and
Awesome.
go to their shows if we weren't playing. If it was a straight up metal show, I wasn't going, oh, this is scary, it's a metal show, And they would come to punk rock shows, and everybody was very supportive of each other, because the bigger clubs wouldn't book either the most extreme metal bands or the crossover bands or the more extreme punk rock bands. So there was this big empty place for everybody to just kind of get together and go like, let's have a good time. Let's put on a show, or, other stuff like that. So that was cool. It was a nice sort of, there was a nice brotherhood involved with that.
Camaraderie between bands that helping each other. That's awesome.
Yeah, and there was even the bands that were getting more established, like Possessed, or even Metallica in the very early days. They would go to punk rock shows, because they like that stuff. I mean, obviously all of those sort of metal bands, like the Metal Blade bands, their speed comes from listening to hardcore and punk rock, so
Exactly.
and I mean, like, what's his name? Guy who joined Metallica, he was from Suicidal Tendencies. So Robert, Trujillo.
Exactly.
Yeah. So straight up, there's a connection. What I do is I just, like you say, it's just the itch to scratch it. If you can play fast, it's fun to play fast.
Yeah.
I mean, but I can't, I know my place. I mean, the people who I really, really think are amazing, like John McLaughlin and people like that.
That's that. Yeah.
Or like Alan Holdsworth.
I'm a big Mahavishnu Orchestra fan, and when I saw your YouTube channel talking about the records, I was, oh man, that's great, because here the only people who like that stuff is people who are in the conservatory or just studying music, teachers.
Yeah.
And people who like punk rock or metal, I don't know why. It's weird.
Well, it is an interesting thing, because I mean, I first found out about Mahavishnu Orchestra because there used to be a show on television in the mid-70s, back when there was only 3 television channels. And so there was a show called In Concert.
Yeah.
And it was on ABC. I think some of it's up on YouTube now.
Yeah, Don something, isn't it? Don, what's the name of it?
No, that's a different one. There was like 3 of them. One was just called In Concert. And then there was Don Kirshner's Rock Concert. And he was really funny because he was this New York guy, and he used to do the introductions with this big New York accent. So I even remember being at school, and everybody would, on Monday morning, the show was on Saturday night. On Monday morning, everybody would get together and talk about Don Kirshner's Rock Concert and do the imitation of him talking, which was really funny.
Yeah.
But on the show, Don Kirshner's Rock Concert, I think, was mainly done in a studio with a live audience. But the cool thing about the show In Concert was they would actually go to a concert and shoot a live concert. And they'd have 3 different acts on. And so like they would go to 3 different concerts and shoot 3 different acts. And I think the show was like an hour and a half long, and it would start at midnight and it would end at 1:30 in the morning. So I remember going to my friend John, the drummer's house, and spending the night so we could watch In Concert. And so one of them had the Mahavishnu Orchestra on, and I'd never heard of them. I remember trying to figure out how to pronounce the name of the band,
Yes.
and kind of cutting out the thing from the TV guide and trying to remember it. But it was it was probably Birds of Fire time, and
Yeah.
I just didn't even know what it was, and I couldn't even. I was listening to Aerosmith and ZZ Top, and I
Yeah,
saw that, and
from another dimension. Like,
I was just going, okay, there's a guy in a white suit with short hair and a double neck guitar, and
you look
he's
weird.
playing through two stacks of Marshalls, and Billy Cobham played a drum solo, and I couldn't believe what he was doing. It made me kind of afraid, actually. I just thought,
Sure.
how do you even do that?
Was the Bluebird your last LP to date, Mark?
It was, yeah.
This was
And incredibly, it's, I realize that it's been probably 4 or 5 years since I was in the studio. It's pre-pandemic.
Yeah,
Yeah, so.
Because Bell Ringer was a little bit before.
Yep. Yeah. So that was terrible timing for all of that. But that's fine. I mean, it can. I'll still probably make another record at some point, So.
Sure. We hope, because this one, I think, is really, really interesting record because it's very diverse, and no song is telling you the whole of the record. Some are really melodic, slow, kind of like melancholic, and some others are faster, like we spoke in our last conversation.
Yep.
So, and this was in 2019. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's right. It came out in 2019, so I actually recorded it in 2018. So, yeah, that's.
How long it took? Can you give us a little insight of that? Maybe a year between rehearsing, recording, or less?
No, it was pretty fast. I mean, I spend a lot of time thinking about what I'm going to do. But recording it was really just about a week and a half.
Oh.
And I went and mixed it in probably 5 days or something with Chad, who mixes all of my records. And
yeah, we spoke about him the last time.
Yeah. So it's pretty quick. Once I have everything ready to go, and I decide who I want to have play on it, it happens really fast. It's really just me deciding what to do. I always have quite a long period of just trying to make decisions about what I want to do.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I'm not really sitting there thinking, I have to write a bunch of songs. I don't have any songs. It's more I have a whole bunch of puzzle pieces, and I'm just trying to figure out, what it's going to turn into. So It's very sort of conceptual and sentimental, and I was letting my intuition guide me about things, and then.
That's right.
Bluebird, just the idea of a bluebird kept emerging in a few different places, so that made me think, oh, this should be the bluebird. And then it just kept appearing. How sometimes things are trying to get your attention. And sometimes you're thinking, oh, that's, you're not paying attention. So I started paying attention to the bluebird, and then I went, okay, I just had to give in and make it the bluebird.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, like you say, that there are things and themes or images that are chasing your inside of your mind, your imagination. They're just like almost telling you that.
They are.
Yeah, it's a very strange thing.
they're trying to get your attention.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's difficult to learn how to pay attention to things that are not as obvious.
Yes. Yes. Or abstract.
It's like a code. It's like something is sending you a code, and you can't quite understand the code.
Exactly.
So you have to sort of stop listening and pay attention. It's an odd thing.
It's more like an intuition, or maybe.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to stop thinking to be
Yeah.
able to start thinking.
Yeah. And did you lay down your tracks first, or did they, when you hired them? What was let's say the first sessions?
No, I would just give them all demos. I would have like everything arranged. I'd have the arrangements done. So like with Pat Harris, I mean, I had a chart for him, and all the stuff I was doing with Aaron had everything charted. And then I knew all my stuff, and I got demos to Rob Halsman, and he knew all the parts by the time we got together. So
Oh, great.
he lives in Atlanta, so he just came out and already knew the stuff. So that's really good, when you work with people who are kind of dialed in, they're real musicians. You can just go, here's the parts, and they nail it. You can make little adjustments and things work out fine. So the better they know their parts, the easier it is to just make decisions about everything.
Yes.
Because they're already playing it perfectly. So then if you want to
Yes.
make an adjustment, it's very easy to do. So I'm grateful for being able to play with great players.